All right, all right. Hello, hello, hello to everybody. We have not met. I am Lorna Owens. I am running this show. I thank you for joining me at the kitchen table, wherever you are in the world. Wonderful, wonderful. I'm raising some wine for you, my non-alcoholic wine. That's okay. If that's okay with you, then that's okay with me. All right, tonight I have somebody really, really special, and her name is Suzanne Hoffman. She's a recovering attorney, like I am. That's how some of the specialness happens. And her book is called, let me tell you, this book is fabulous. All right, let me see before I do that. Hey, Facebook, I'm looking for you guys to make sure that you're on and that you're seeing me and that you're hearing me. Just let me see. Oops, we don't want to do that. All right, all right. Okay, we'll make that, we'll figure that out in a second. Because all I want to do is, I realize that sometimes the privacy stays on by itself and your friends will not be able to see us. So I just made sure it's public. So back to this book. Guys, you got to get this book. It's like,
And
ooh,
the
it's
second
like,
one.
ooh, it's one of those books you're like, ooh, every page. The photography is spectacular. All right, Susan, hello, welcome, welcome.
Hi, how are y'all? Buonasera.
Okay, good. First of all, to give you a little bit of her background, she's a former attorney and practiced primarily in Switzerland. And Piemonte found her and embraced her in 2016. I believe she wrote this book about, it's called Labor of Love. And it's the wine Family Women of Piemonte. You can hear all about it. But before, it's only fair that we bring her on board. Susan, where are you from? Where were you born? Meaning so.
Well, I'm a child of the bayou. I was actually born right on the riverbank in New Orleans, and to family. My mother was Sicilian. She was second generation, and my father was half Acadian, half Irish. And so spent the first 2 or 3 years in New Orleans, actually in Aurora Gardens on the West Bank. And then my father moved us to Thibodaux, Louisiana, when he built the first shipyards for McDermott Shipyard in Morgan City, Louisiana. And it was kind of the Wild West then. So he put his family, his daughter and his three sons, my older brothers, in Thibodaux. It was a little more established.
Right, all right. And I said you're a recovering attorney. Hold that thought. I want to thank Keith Edwards before I forget, who made this happen easily for me. I was told about Susanna and I reached out to him and he just made it happen. So thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Keith. So going back to your conversation, when did you realize you wanted to be a lawyer?
It was kind of late in life. I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. No, I had a passion from the beginning to go into medicine, to be a surgeon, and that I got kind of off the track after university. Long story, but I ended up. We were working. I'm an engineer, and I was working in the offshore oil industry with my husband, and in the mid '80s, and there was a big crash in the industry. And I said, well, two of us in the same household in the same industry that's struggling, one of us needs to do something else. So I went to law school when I was 30 years old.
Okay,
So
you went to Tulane, is that where you went?
no, I got my engineering degree, biomedical engineering degree from Tulane. I went to South Texas College of Law
Ah,
in Houston. We were living in Houston at the time.
there you go. And you went to live in Switzerland, you practiced law in Switzerland. What was that about? And how comes you decided, oh, I'm going to move to Switzerland and I'm going to practice law? How did that manifest itself?
Well, actually, I was working in-house when I first moved there with my husband in the early 90s, right after I was licensed. I was doing some volunteer work at the UN. The women's NGO had a big expo, so I was helping with that, working on that. And then I went to work for Swiss Re Insurance in Zurich in '95, and worked in-house there. So that was quite an experience. And then involved in an aviation project, but unfortunately, 9/11 kind of sidetracked that. But in 99, I discovered Piemonte, and that literally changed my life.
And you said that you discovered it, but I read where you said it discovered you, right? So tell us about that. Let's
Yeah.
start the conversation.
I would say that it discovered me. I was there for the first time with my mother and my dog Otis, and the rain, the mud, everything. It was amazing that I would even want to go back. But there was something about the region that attracted me. And of course, as I say in Labor of Love, and I repeat it in my novel, in my notes, that I always take the road not taken. I go on my own, and everybody, all the Americans were going to Tuscany, and my colleagues, my Swiss and German colleagues, were going to Piemonte. And so I wanted to explore that. And it just, it was early stages. I'm so blessed I got to see it then before it exploded on the scene as a major wine tourism location. Because I got to see what it was like as this generation of young vintners in their 30s and 40s were they were in school, and they were the ones that spoke English. No one else did, and their families. So it was really a special moment. And through the times we were going there, I kept meeting people. There was no internet search that you could do.
Right.
And cell phones, there were no iPhones then, so cell phones were a little bit rudimentary. And then I met Geoffrey Chilcott, the cellar master of Marchese di Grisi in Barbaresco. I capture that experience that day when I met him, because I think, I think we can all look at our lives and say there were moments that really changed us forever and changed our path. And it was that day. And I captured
Hold on,
that.
I thought about it with Jeffrey, but for those who are watching and don't know where Piemonte is, where is it closest to?
It's in Northwest Italy. It's the largest land-based region of Italy, with Sicily being the largest region. Turin is the capital of Piemonte, and it was also the first capital of unified Italy back in the 1860s.
Oh, gotcha. And before we go back to Jeffrey, it's also known for some things, and one of which I believe is white truffle, maybe
Yeah.
the most expensive white truffle in the world. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know about the most expensive, but it's the best. And I would say it's the most expensive. When in 2018, there were a lot of white truffles, and so it was a wonderful season. So they were running about €2.50 a gram, which is wonderful. You have like 30 euros added to your plate instead of 50, 60, or 70. But yeah, they're very well known, of course, for the wines. We can talk about that another time, but also their hazelnuts.
Right.
Gentile. And that's where Nutella was born, as I refer to that in Labor of Love.
Yeah. All right, so let's settle down into the wine. We've taken everything out of the way, so now we're on wine. We'll stay on wine. You met Jeffrey. How did you meet Jeffrey? Jeffrey doesn't sound like an Italian name.
No, he is a Kiwi, and I would say, he's the one person that if you're into wine, if you're into the region, you want to discover the region, and you speak English, if you speak any language, you're gonna want to meet Jeffrey. When he came to Piemonte it was about 35 years ago now, he didn't speak Italian. He just barely. He had been working in Italy, but also the biggest problem for him is he didn't speak Piemontese. And his first job was in the vineyards. And in those days, that's what they spoke. That's what the workers spoke, Piemontese. So Jeffrey is an anomaly in that he's a foreigner with his roots planted firmly in Piemonte now. And he speaks, like I said, he speaks dialect. He speaks perfect Italian. And he's the guy that opened all the doors for me. And really, as a matter of fact, as a sidebar, I was working on a book about Jeffrey when COVID hit, and made it a little bit impossible to work on that one, so I did the novel.
But how did you meet Jeffrey in the first place? Because my understanding where you had to go sounded remote, difficult to find. It's like fate assisted you all along the way, right? Is that what happened?
It was kismet. It was definitely kismet on so many levels. This was my third trip to Piemonte, my husband's second trip, and we were with friends. And we had a wine, a Barbaresco Martinenga 1995 at one of the restaurants. And we were told if we went to the Enoteca Regionale in Barbaresco, we could find the wine there. So we went. They had no wine. And I think so often about what would have happened if they had the wine. You know, I wouldn't have gone in search at that moment, but they didn't have any. And it was a day where you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. And the fog was so dense. It was November of 2000. And so we went in search. Marisa at the Enoteca told us where to go. And she said, oh, there's a guy who speaks English. So of course we're going to go there. And we could not find it. We went down into the Rio Sordo Valley. We went up and down and all around. And finally we're giving up. And we were driving back up. The fog lifted ever so slightly. And in those days, they had a long sign called the località, the little hamlet. And it said Martinenga. And I knew that that was the place. And the road was right after the sign. And I drove up. I knocked on the door, the cellar door. And out comes this tall guy in shorts and Wellingtons and hands the color of rubies. And it was Jeffrey.
Wow.
And today that wouldn't happen, that you can say, I'm here to taste wine, and you get taken in and you taste the wine. And we didn't just taste one wine. I think we must have had probably 15 bottles on the table at that time. We didn't drink all the bottles, okay?
Okay.
We drank multiple.
Like you're a heavy hitter.
No. But they have a very broad excuse me, a broad portfolio of whites and reds. And so we were tasting almost every wine in the portfolio and more than one vintage of each. And that was it. That was it.
And Italy is divided, or correct me, into wine regions, right? So is it fair to say when you're speaking about wines in the context of Italy, you're oftentimes speaking about wine regions?
Yeah, I mean, even within Piemonte, you're going to have different wine areas, different wines, different denominations. They're called, instead of appellations like you have in France. Excuse me. And of course, so many Americans are familiar with Tuscan wines, and for many Americans, Pinot Grigio is one of the first white wines, and that's from over in the Northeast. But for me, you know, it was Piemonte from the beginning. Barbaresco and Barolo are made 100% from the Nebbiolo grape, and it is not an easy grape to become friends with. And but it is, once you make that connection and once you begin to understand it and understand what goes into the making of this wine, the growing of the grapes and the making of the wine, you can't put it down. You have this innate, deep connection. And then you start to find the people behind the labels, and you're never going to let go of Piemonte after that.
And this particular grape only grows in the two areas you talked about?
Well, it does grow in Piemonte and Valtellina, and there have been attempts of growing it in the States and all, but there's something about the terroir of this region of Piemonte. And by terroir, I don't just mean the dirt, the soil, I mean the whole climate, the exposition. And so as a result of that, you really, the grape is able to show itself in its best way. And the people who are making the wines today are standing on the shoulders of some wonderful people who suffered greatly during the early 20th century and fought hard to recover from the Nazi occupation and the war, and then also their own civil war following the armistice and following the Liberation Day. There was a lot of fighting. There wasn't a monolithic partisan group. So they had a lot of issues to get over, and yet they, as the new century dawned, they were on the scene, and they were they are now known as one of the greatest wine regions in the world, standing aside Burgundy and Bordeaux. And some people might argue with me on that, but I will stand with my Piemontese.
So why did you write this book?
I wrote the book. It started in August of 2012, and I told my husband, I said, I need to do something. I couldn't practice there. I had been away from the US legal scene too long. And when you work for the world's second largest reinsurance company and you come to a small town, it's a little hard to pick up and work. There wasn't much aviation reinsurance business there. So I just got this desire to write about these women and these families because I'd heard the stories of what had happened during the Nazi occupation, during the fascist era, particularly with chapter 1 of Labor of Love. Beatrice Rizzolio is told to me by her granddaughter, Giovanna, who incidentally, Beatrice gave rise to my character, Madame Alia, in my novel, Angel of Alta Langhe. So when I heard the story about her standing in front of a firing squad trying to keep them from shooting teenage boys in retaliation for partisan activity, I said, surely somebody has written about that. And the answer was no, because people just didn't talk about the war. The attitude afterwards, as everybody said, after the war and after the Republic was born, was let's just get on with it. We have to get on with it. That's in the past. And nobody really wanted to look back because there was so much schisms between people that were for the fascists, were against the fascists, were with, working with the Nazis, were working against the Nazis. It was a horrible time, and the wounds were very deep. Fortunately for me, I was able to meet some of these people that were at the twilight of their lives, and they wanted to tell the stories. And I heard the stories and I was able to write them down. But the thing is that I went with the intention in March of 2013, when I went on a research trip, that I would, write about 8-9 families and make that. It just grew organically. Because everybody said, oh, well, you need to talk to this person. You need to talk to that person. You need to include this family or that family. And so it grew, and there's 22 families in the book. I could.
But you also had hours and hours of interview and
yes,
and also what I like about the book is you can tell that you took great care in telling their story, right? Respecting the culture and the background, and because sometimes people write out about other people and people can't even see them, they don't even recognize the story, but do they recognize themselves in this? And how did you go about making sure that you told their story?
Well, I have to say, Lorna, it was a huge responsibility, and it was frightening. More frightening with the novel, and I'll get to that in a second, than it was with Labor of Love. On Labor of Love, I did so much fact checking and back and forth with them. So, here I was in Colorado. I made several trips and I spent months there working on it. But at the end of my trip in 2015, in June of 2015, I said, I got to stop. I have to put it all down and we have to start. And so I started writing on October 1st with my editor. I said, I have to finish on December 31st so we can get this published for the 2nd of June of 16. It happened to be the anniversary, the 70th anniversary of women exercising their right to vote for the first time. Suffrage had come to Italy. and they voted in the referendum for the republic or the monarchy. So so I just started to write and back and forth with them and fact checking, and that's how it all came together.
You know, as we'll certainly talk some more about, but there's something I liked, and I tell you who you recognize. Let me put this pen here. Person who wrote the foreword to your book,
Yeah,
Maurizio.
Maurizio.
Yeah, he says, with her sensibility and passion, Susanna has slowly come ever so closer to our culture and has absorbed its intimate values. She visited the women who witnessed the past, befriended these women, and patiently listened to her story. Only then did she begin to write about them with a deep sense of urgency and commitment. I think that is beautiful, and I think it tells you sense that in this book.
That Maurizio, really, his words touch me, and every time I hear it, I mean, it really touches me deeply, because Maurizio was really my inspiration to write this book. I got his book, The Mystery of Barolo, back when it came out. So it was the early 2000s. And it was a series of testimonials by the wine producers, mostly men, and including his father, Gigi Rosso, who was such a wonderful man. I was so lucky to get to know him before he passed. And so Maurizio has been really my mentor and my guide through this whole process of writing, not just Labor of Love, but also Angel of Alta Langhe. He's been a huge advocate of mine, introduced me to my publisher there, for Angel, and has introduced me to many people who have really helped a great deal with the book, especially with the novel, all of the cultural aspects that I was able to weave into there. Maurizio was a big help, along with so many other people, but I always knew that Maurizio, and I know today that he's always there for me and always supportive of me. Maurizio himself not only is a vintner, but he is a prolific writer. He writes historical novels that are, I wish they were translated.
Okay. What do you get out of writing, and let's talk about your second book, and why did you want to put that out? What are you trying to say? What are you having the world take notice of?
With Angel?
Yes.
With Angel of Alta Langhe. Well, the book was born during COVID because I had to do something. I couldn't work on the biography of Jeffrey Chilcott. So I had this wealth of information from Labor of Love research, and also I had 4 years more of research after that, and spending time there, months at a time there. And it had always been my passion, my desire to be able to write a novel. I'm not a novelist. I went to engineering school and law school. I didn't, get my master's in fine arts. So, but I have this wonderful editor, Alicia Harris, and she stood by me. She was my angel. She's the godmother of Angel of Alta Langhe. And I felt that to reach more people with the story, as we're living quite close to the 1930s, that Labor of Love is a limited distribution. I wanted to have something that people outside the wine industry would pick up and read. And the result of it has just been amazing for me personally, and also for the region. Nobody has written about that era in a historical fiction in English. Oh my God, there's fabulous books written by the likes of Beppe Fenoglio and Cesare Pavesi and Nuto Ravelli, but no one had started writing it in English, and about the whole what they went through during the Nazi occupation, during the fascist era before that. The biggest, I wish the book was more widely distributed here in the States, but I think, and then we all wish for a big New York Times review, but for me, in my heart, and what makes me really, I don't know, just keep at it and keep writing, was when these octogenarians and nonagenarians told me, how was it that an American woman could write what we experienced in such a way? They told me, I captured it. They said, how did you know this? Many of them hadn't thought about that era or talked about that era. Now they started to talk about it. And many of them have left since the book has been out in Italian in 2023. And it's just been such a reward to be able to deliver that to them, to have it translated and have it delivered to them, and to be able to read before they pass. And it's a big book. It's in Italian, it's 600 pages. And some of them read it in 3 and 4 days.
Yeah, it was their story. And there's, so listen, guys, one quick area is that Suzanne will be here April 26th for And the Women Gather. This is just a taste. I'm sure you can feel that. We could talk for hours and hours, and part of it is just the honesty and the emotion she brings to her writing, and the clarity that comes with that. So if you're in DeLand, the Muse bookstore has that book, and she will bring this book, Labor of Love, with her. I know some of you guys want it, so if you want it, you might want to let me know, because I do believe that there will not be lots and lots of copies of this book available. So you need to put your order in. You have to go through me first to get that, but tell everybody, this is just amazing. We'll get a chance to meet her, hear her tell these stories again, and understand why she writes and for me, it's always about the women, and the fact that their voices, we're honest when we and respectful when we tell their story. And it's also about wines and culture and tradition and modernity, but it's also about the women who will tell you. One of your ladies said how farming is hard work, but she couldn't see herself doing anything else, right?
Yeah.
And guys, you're gonna have to come April 26th.
Please do.
Yeah, the Athens Theater. She's going to be here, and we're going to have a wonderful time. Remember, the brunch starts if you bought brunch tickets, at 10 o'clock. We're blocking off the street, the Indiana. Beautiful, fresh flowers, white tablecloth, that's what we do. And then we go into the theater for like Jazz with Shine, and then our authors. So tell everybody, go to desert-sage.co. Tell everybody, Susanna,
Thank you.
I gotta go to dinner with some people. So
Thanks so
we
much.
could be
Thanks so
here
much for making this
all
happen.
day. This is lovely, and I love your writing. And thank you so much. Thank you for your generosity of spirit. All right.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Peace and
Have a
blessings.
wonderful
Peace and
evening.
blessings.
Bon
Oh, do
appetito.
you have any wine you were drinking?
I am drinking Chardonnay Valentine from Carballo, Valentina Grasso's Labor of Love.
Oh no, I'm glad it came in. That's a closing thought. That is a closing. So I'll see you, my love. See you soon.
Take care. Ciao, ciao. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.